Hello and welcome everyone to this final day of hybrid ISS. Super happy to chair this session today. And we have three exciting talks in the session. First one up will be Jason Leigh, who will talk about something that we are all quite familiar with, co-located and remote meetings and how we can share and create content in these situations. So Jason, if you are ready, please go ahead and yeah, happy to welcome you to ISS. Let's go.
This is the work primarily of Nurit Kirshenbaum, who's my PhD student, but she's just finishing her PhD dissertation. So she's frantically trying to finish that and so unable to present for today. So I'm stepping in for her. So I'm Jason Leigh, I'm professor of computer science at the Laboratory for Advanced Visualization Applications at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. Previously, I was director of the Electronic Visualization Lab at the University of Illinois, Chicago. This project, this little study is a collaboration between my lab, Chicago, and also Virginia Tech. There's some really great people working on this project. And ostensibly, what we are trying to look at here is how complex canvases can help improve collaborative meetings. Now, ordinarily, when we do HCI work, when most of us do human-computer interaction work, we develop a new technique and then we try to evaluate it in some way to figure out how it's better. Well, this paper is kind of backwards. It's kind of going in the opposite direction. And the reason I say that is this is about what happens when you take an established community who have been using some advanced technology for almost 20 years, and now you're forcing them to use an ancient technology. So what do you think would happen? Like, would people go mad? Would they have withdrawal symptoms? Would they revolt? And so the community that we're talking about here are the community that have become very accustomed to using complex canvases. And what I mean by complex canvases are ostensibly people who've been using a piece of software called Sage, which started out as the Scalable Adaptive Graphics Environment. And basically it's software to enable large tile display walls to be supported as if it were one completely seamless canvas for depositing visualizations and information so people can come to decisions more effectively. And so the SAGE project essentially was born in 2004. And now, most recently, coming in December 2021, we're going to be releasing the SAGE 3 software. And over all this time period, we went from tile displays with big borders and driven by clusters of computers to smaller borders driven by single PCs to, well, you can even have your own Sage wall at home costing as little as $600 for these two 4K displays. And so here are some examples of locations that are running Sage in their display environments in the world. If I were to look at some of the institutions, there are about 800 out there, but the more recent ones, recent 100 are listed here. I should have looked up Poland to see if there's one in Poland for this talk. And so what can you do in front of these Sage environments, right? So one of the things you can do is that you can juxtapose video conferencing that you're used to with the ability to throw arbitrary content on the large display wall. Like, for example, you can have multiple shared PDF files opened up on multiple pages simultaneously and synchronously flip through them together in a collaboration. Sage allows you to also share multiple screen shares. So, for example, if you have two or more collaborators with their laptop screens, you can push each of these screens in real time onto the display walls and show them simultaneously. You can also run web applications. So, for example, you can launch a YouTube video, you can run Google Docs, you can run Google spreadsheets, and here you can see someone typing on the Google Doc, and you see the updates on the large display wall. And the nice thing about doing this is that you can literally take up, use all the screen real estate in your display wall to open up a giant spreadsheet. And then brainstorming is great on these large display walls. Sage lets you turn it into one giant Post-it board where you can just stick Post-it notes. So you can, conduct brainstorming exercises without having to use, classically paper, right? So what's the motivation behind doing this work? So in this particular study, what we wanted to find out was, how are the properties of effective meetings? In other words, these properties, whether we're able to contribute content in the meeting, whether we're able to actively participate in the meeting, whether we're able to receive feedback or make suggestions, reach consensus, remain attentive, and also get through all the technological issues, whether we're able to support these properties within these kinds of situations. And by these situations, I mean modalities such as Sage, where you use a large display wall to conduct collaborative meetings, or you go back to using a classical single projector, like in Europe, we tend to call these projectors beamers, right? And as part of the study, what happened in the middle of the study was COVID happened, and suddenly we all had to go home and we couldn't come into the lab. So we thought, well, this could be an opportunity to study what would happen to this community that was basically spent 20 years in front of display walls, or to go back to using something like Zoom. And so what are the observed patterns of content contributions over time and space? What is the role of abundant space provided by the large display walls? Those are questions that we were curious about. And so this is a study. We did about 14 students, and they were everything from computer scientists, industrial designers, graphic designers, creative media types. There was also one visiting researcher from Virginia Tech. That was Professor Chris North, who's done a lot of research studying users in large display walls. And we did it in 2 phases. The first phase was 5 weeks alternating between the Sage wall and just the projector. And then suddenly COVID happened and we had to abandon all this and go and try and do this in Zoom. So the nice thing was we had a way to compare now 3 instances. Now, all these users, by the way, were already fluent in using Sage 2, projectors, and video conferencing, like Whereby, Skype, Zoom, Jitsi, okay? So there wasn't really any additional training that had to go on for these users. It was just a matter of going from Sage now back to projectors and then back to Zoom. What are the differences? So this is the lab setup for the first part of the experiment. On the right-hand side, we have one large display wall. On the left-hand side, you have another large display wall called Pele. The one on the right is called Makani. And basically, for the experiment, students would basically sit around this table with their laptops open, and they would share content on these display walls. Or if we were to set up the single projector scenario, we would bring out a projection screen and we put a little projector right down here and project it onto the projection wall, right? Now, here's a quick, summary of what happened, right? So we did a little survey and we asked them, based on the criteria that we talked about earlier on for effective collaboration, do people maintain focus in a meeting? Do they contribute content to the meeting? Was it easy to contribute content? Were people actively participating? Were you able to give sufficient feedback? Were you able to make suggestions? Did you enjoy using this technology, right? We asked them, the individuals, how they felt, but we also asked them, how did they feel the others in the collaboration felt? And on this side, we've got essentially the scores for using Sage. In the middle, we have the scores for using just the projector. And then on the right-hand side, we have the Zoom. So just sort of at a high level glance, you can sort of see a noticeable difference between the Sage case and these 2 other situations. And then you also notice probably from the Zoom and the single projector case, they're very, very similar, right? Whereas there seemed to be much better scoring, so to speak, in the Sage case. So that's great, but what's going on? Let's go one level deeper. So if I were to go in one level deeper, the top row kind of shows you the kind of observed pattern of use for a projector. Most of the people are familiar with this, right? You plug in your projector on a cable, you show your screen, you pass the cable on to the next person, you show your screen, you pass it on to the next person, and they show their screen. And someone might interrupt by asking a question, or they'll hold the interruption to the end of the presentation, right? Compared to Zoom, well, Zoom isn't that different. There's some semi-parallel content contribution going on in that you might have on the side a chat box where people are typing in comments or people are typing URLs for you to look at. You really can't easily share more than that. If you want to share more than one screen, at least before, during the COVID time, Zoom wasn't advanced enough to share more than one screen at the same time. Now, Zoom can do a maximum of 2. Now, finally, we get to the Sage scenario. And in the Sage scenario, you can see, well, you might have someone starting to talk by showing their laptop screen, but then another person might interject, and they would interject by either putting in content around the main presentation screen, or they would just go ahead and share their screen right next to it and allow you to do a comparison between the content in between the screens. And then maybe somebody else, a third person, might also show their screen and add more content. So the kinds of behavior that you start seeing emerging are like these. People would queue up ideas by placing content on around the periphery of the screen. This is a great way to externalize their thoughts in the meeting, so they don't forget later when they have to make a decision. There's direct referencing where these users all have their own pointers and they can point at the content on the screen when they're referring to them. There's real-time mediation. Folks are helping each other out, resizing documents on the screen, moving them around for optimal viewing. There's also information continuity. In other words, you get a sense for when these documents were placed there, so you have some sense of the history of when those documents were introduced. Then there's information clustering, where if you're in a brainstorming session, you might take a bunch of related documents and put them near each other. And then lastly, spatial memory, where you are able to remember where things were because you just placed them there and refer back to them. Now, a lot of these things were actually discovered back as early as the 80s by Gary Olson, who did a lot of this war room style work using classical war rooms on paper. And it's really only been more recently that we're able to really replicate this well using computing technology. As far as how much stuff people put on these two side walls, and is there any correlation? I mean, Makani was the main presentation screen, but as you can see, there really isn't a direct correlation where people might put more things on the periphery screen or more things in the central screen. They were using it for whatever purposes they needed. So sometimes you didn't want to interrupt someone and you want a side thought, and so you can start putting content on the side screens. And so what can we take away from this as far as designing for future collaboration system? Well, one is video conferencing is obviously not enough. And I think we've all realized that from using Zoom. We want much richer media. We want to be able to share screens, PDF documents, video files, notes, pictures, and functioning websites. We want the web pages to be actually interactable and synchronized between clients. This is a big problem with current web-based technologies. You have advertisements that are inconsistent between sites, right, and content that changes between sites when you go to the web pages. And as the Sage walls have morphed into different configuration and sizes, you want to make sure the system's able to accommodate or create user interfaces that work seamlessly and easily across all these different environments. And of course, you want to be able to support remote users. Previously, Sage was designed so that you had to be in front of a tile display wall. Where we want to go essentially is a capability where we can be at home working in front of our virtual Sage wall. And then when we go into work, we can work in front of the real physical display wall. We want the interaction to be spontaneous, simultaneous, no turn taking, right? We want this canvas potentially to be infinite. We don't want to be limited by the physical limits of the actual tile display. And lastly, as we put more and more content on the walls, we're going to need more help to help mediate the content. And this is a great opportunity to introduce artificial intelligence to do some content organization. So I'm going to pretty much stop here to entertain questions. All I wanted to end with is that we're about to release an alpha version of Sage 3. It's completely free and it will be released open source once we clean up the source code. If you want to find out when we are going to release the software, go to tinyurl.com/sagecommunity. It'll get you onto Slack. Get on there and then you'll see the notices posted. And lastly, I want to thank our funding agencies for providing support for this work. Thank you so much. Aloha. I hope I didn't go too long.
Thank you so much, Jason, for this entertaining talk. I really love how you made something or how you got something positive out of the whole pandemic situation. That's great. So, do we have any questions from the audience? Then I will ask the first question. So, I was wondering about the sequential content sharing, because there you have the agency with the person who is presenting the content, and then the agency moves on to the next person. And I was wondering if you can elaborate a bit on the sense of agency and what you observed with the parallel content sharing in contrast to that.
Right. Well, I mean, agency is completely parallel in the Sage situation. And it's also surprising how well mediated and controlled the agency is. I mean, the first gut reaction you get when you tell people this is what the capability is, that this is going to be complete chaos. People are going to be putting content everywhere and it's going to be so distracting. But as it turns out, people are really good at being polite about putting the content in the peripheries and then moving it into place. And the mere fact that they're able to exact agency to put content in there allows them to be more attentive in the meetings, because they are looking for the moment where they can speak and then enlarge their content to make their point. So it kind of augments agency in some ways.
That's super interesting to hear, because I was wondering about that, if it creates chaos eventually, or if it also creates eventually a lot of work to go through all these ideas and to pick the ones that should be discussed. So that's super, super interesting. I will check the chat for a second. It looks like we have a question there. So Rafael is asking, do you think we can reach a level of experience similar between a remote user using the Sage setup with a distant team than a co-located experience?
Right, so that's the question that every person in computer supported cooperative work is trying to solve, right? And of course, you've all heard all the hype on the publicity for Facebook's Meta, where they're trying to create a metaverse where people can collaborate in that world. We have done some research in this area. We have developed a fully immersive virtual reality version of Sage and compared it against users in regular Sage. And it can be done, and it's getting very, very close. As long as the technologies for virtual reality get to that point where they're light enough, a little bit cheaper, higher resolution, better power consumption, and frankly, just more comfortable, we can do it. I think technologically, I believe we're very, very close once we improve the headsets.
Yeah, we have to move on to the next talk, but I think that's a nice vision to end this talk with. So thanks again, Jason. A round of applause, please, for this talk.